Welcome back to Applied Algebra. We are starting Chapter 6, Equations and Formulas, and we're going to start with Section 6.1, Equations. The first thing we need to do is talk a little bit about terminology. Some of these expressions you may have heard prior. A variable is that letter, usually used as a letter, that we use to denote something we do not know. So it could be a symbol. Sometimes we use Greek letters. An algebraic expression, that is just a combination of numbers, variables, and symbols. Now when we talk about the symbols, the idea here is that we could have some pluses and minuses, some division, some multiplication as well. An equation is where we have some algebraic expressions, but they are equal to each other. So if you see an equal sign, it's an equation. And in this section, in the last chapter, you were asked just to simplify, and in this chapter we're going to actually solve. That means we have to find out what is the value of that unknown. And the value of that unknown is called the solution or the root. Okay, so when we are doing this, we have to think about, is there a certain order that we have to do it in? And really we're going to do the order of operations backwards. So instead of ending with adding and subtracting, we're going to start with doing any adding or subtracting. Then we're going to do any multiplying or dividing. Then we'll deal with the exponents and then the parentheses at the end. This first one just has one thing that it has to be done. And so right now we have x divided by 24 equals 2.6. So some number divided by 24 gives us 2.6. And in order to find out what that something is, we do the opposite operation. This problem is asking us to divide, so the opposite of dividing is to multiply. So to find the solution, we are going to multiply by the value. So instead of dividing by 24, I'm going to times by 24. And if I do something to one side, I have to do it to the other, otherwise it changes the value of the problem. So x equals, I need to grab my calculator, 2.6 times 24, 62.4. Sometimes your answers will come out to be whole numbers, sometimes they won't, and that's fine. That doesn't mean you did it wrong. Now, if you want to check this to make sure you did do it right, just do the opposite. Put the value in where the x is. So do 62.4, divide it by the 24, and you should end up with whatever the equal to was, which in this case was 2.6. So yep, you did it right. On number 2, the -5 and the variable are multiplying. So whenever there's nothing between two things, that means it's being multiplied. In order to solve it, I have to do the opposite of multiplication. The opposite of multiplication is to divide. So we're going to divide by -5. That makes that one go away. So y equals -30 divided by -5. Two negatives make a positive. 30 divided by 5 is 6. Now notice it doesn't matter where the variable is, it could be on either side. And then we could check -5 times +6 is -30. Here the only thing that's happening is something plus 6 equals 6. So to solve it, we'll do the opposite of adding. The opposite of adding is to subtract 6. Again, do it to both sides so we don't change the value. 6 minus 6 is 0. Check it. 0 plus 6. Yep, that's 6. And some of these checks you obviously could do in your head. You don't have to do them on paper. I'm just showing them on paper. On number 4 here, there is something occurring, but what's occurring is there is an invisible 1 between this, so really it's -1 times x equals 3. So to get x by itself, so I know what it is, I do the opposite of this multiplication, so that means I'm going to divide by -1. So 3 divided by -1 gives us an x value of -3. If I think about it, what this original is saying is I did the opposite of -3. The opposite of -3 is +3, so it does check. So now we have a couple that have more than one step. The first one's all only a single step. So when we think about what it said we had to do in order, we're going backwards. So the first thing we're going to do is look for any adding or subtracting that we might need to do. Right now I have x divided by 5 minus 6 equals 4. Well, the opposite of the division is the multiplication. The opposite of the subtracting is the addition. So we need to add 6 first. That would be doing the first step of doing any adding or subtracting. So I have x divided by 5 equals 10. So now I have another step to do because I still don't have the x by itself to see what it's worth. The opposite of dividing is to multiply. 10 times 5 is 50. So that is my answer. Again, we can check it. Now when we're checking it, we go forward with order of operations. We do what we're used to. 50 divided by 5 is 10. 10 minus 6 is 4. So it checks. So we only go backwards when we're solving it. We go forward when we're checking it. 6y plus 8 equals 39. These are sitting next to each other, so they are multiplying. So I have a multiplying, which would be opposite of division. I have an addition, which is the opposite of subtraction. When we solve these, we go with any adding or subtracting first. So I have 6y equals 31. Now I'm going to undo that. So I'm going to divide by 6, because right now they're multiplying. So y equals 5 and 1/6. It's not a whole number. That doesn't mean it's wrong. So this is our answer. 6 times 5 and 1/6 plus 8. We have to multiply 6 times 5 and 1/6. 6 times 5 is 30. 6 times 1/6 is 1. 30 plus 1 is 31. 31 plus 8 is 39. So our last one that we're going to tackle here is 6 minus x equals 7. So on this one, we have the the number in front of the variable. So the 6 is actually a positive 6, so you want to think of it that way. There's a -1 here with that x equals 7. So yeah, we're subtracting the x, but we deal with that last because we don't really move the x, we move what's with it. This 6 is a positive, so to move it, I have to do the opposite of being positive, and that would be being negative. So I'm really going to subtract 6. 7 minus 6 is 1. So I have -1 times x. To get that -1 out of there, I'm going to divide by -1. So 1 divided by -1 is -1. Again, we can check it. Subtracting a negative is the same as adding it. 6 plus 1 is 7. So it checks. Okay, so check the rules, make sure you do things in the opposite order of operations, do one step at a time. The check is not required on the assignments, it's only if you would like to. Have a good day, and I'll be back with 6-2.